Good morning and welcome to the 5th Annual Northwest Arkansas Young Professional Summit. My name is Ross Phillips. I will be your host today as we kind of go through this virtual world. So thank you guys for attending, for being here today. So excited that we're still able to bring this content to you. Even though it looks a little bit different this year, I can assure you that the content, that the speakers are all still going to be what you come to know and expect from the Northwest Arkansas Young Professional Summit. Of course, we couldn't have done this without our sponsors. Thank you to the Farm Studio for allowing us to come in here for 3 days and kind of take over your studio so we can come to you live. Also, thank you to Sam's Furniture for this awesome set that we have here. And if you like what you see, you can get it at Sam's. And of course, we have some in-cash sponsors as well. Our gold sponsors are iHeartMedia and Lamar Advertising. Our silver sponsors, NWA and the Benchmark Group. And our bronze sponsors, the Landmark CPAs. So today we're super excited to just be here to bring this content to you. And I just really want to thank our sponsors, but also I want to thank our leadership team. So this year, as we know, COVID has kind of thrown a couple curveballs at us, but our leadership team, they stuck with us. They're like, hey, we still need to do this. Let's figure out how we can bring this content to these young leaders so you guys can still continue to grow and thrive during this time. Before we get started, I want to lay out some ground rules and some housekeeping notes. Every day, we're going to be coming to you live at 9 a.m. and at 11:45. There's going to be some pre-recorded sessions that are our breakout sessions. Those will be, like I said, those are pre-recorded. So you can view those at any time. You can view them as soon as we're done here at 10, or you can, whenever you're driving home, you can listen to them then. You can listen to them tonight whenever you're having dinner, whenever you're at the gym. You can listen to those this week, next week, all year long. So you're going to have access to our content every single day for the next year. So that's really big. Every day you'll be getting an email from NWA YP Summit at gmail.com. That is where you can, that's where the agendas will come to you from. And you can just check those out every single day to see what the content is going to be for the next day. You'll have the links there for the sessions and everything like that. But you guys are not here to hear me talk. I want to introduce our first speaker today. We're very, very lucky to have Blake Benz with Good Advice Coaching. He is here. He's going to talk to us a little bit about how we can just continue to grow during this time. So I'm going to step out of the way and turn it over to Blake.
All right, good morning. It's great to meet you this morning. I have to say this is probably my first presentation that I've done in this venue, not just this space, obviously, but delivering something like this online. It's a little bit unfamiliar for me. It's also probably unfamiliar for you. I can't say I've ever presented to someone who you may not even be wearing pants. I have no idea. So this is a bit unusual for me, but I'm excited to have you here today. And more importantly, I'm excited to talk to you today about how you can elevate your inner change agent, especially as we dig into this conference, but more importantly, as we navigate the wild, weird, crazy world that we're in right now. You've probably felt inside you this sense of, man, I have to do something about this, or I have to be involved in some way. It's been kind of a crazy year, but I'm excited to bring you some great content today and talk to you about how you can really make a difference, not even on a national scale or on stage somewhere, but really in your own zone with the people around you. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So as Ross mentioned, my name's Blake Benz. I run a company called Good Advice. And what we do is we help people grow and scale their businesses. We work a lot in the leadership space. We work a lot in the sales space. And I'm excited to talk to you about some things that are really something that I've become extremely passionate about, and I hope to make you a little bit more passionate about as well. You should be able to see a slide deck. I don't know if it's already transferred to it for you to see already, but looking at this, by the way, you can check out our website, goodadvicecoaching.com. You can also know that we have a podcast called the Good Advice Podcast. I'm really active on LinkedIn, and I have a newsletter that goes out every Monday called This Week's Good Advice. Now, this is always a little bit awkward when I start talking about ways you can follow me because it kind of feels like a kiss on the first date. You might be thinking, well, dude, I don't even really know you. I don't know if I really want to check out more from you. So just to tell you a little bit more about myself, and actually, before I get into that, let me brag on the podcast for a second. The podcast actually has over 150 episodes. It's listened to in over 40 different countries. It's the top 38 in the US in entrepreneurship and top 200 for all business podcasts. So go ahead and close that Netflix tab that you have open on the other monitor, and you should check out the podcast. It'd be nice to check out and listen to. But more about me, this is me and my beautiful wife, Joy. We've been married for 7 years. She is amazing. She's incredible. I point all of my success for my business to her. We do have a daughter. She is 4 years old. Here she is. Her name is Sadie. We are that obnoxious family that gets professional photos taken of our dog. But I always like to use this joke where I say, hey, I have a daughter. Then I show the dog, and then people are like, oh, haha, it's a dog. It's not really a daughter. Well, I guess I should be honest that I actually do really have a daughter now. Her name is Maylee. She just turned 8 months a couple of days ago, and she is my pride and joy. She's so cute. She's so sweet. I won't mention to her that I showed the dog before I showed her, but here she is, another picture of her. She just totally lights up my world. She's just adorable. And I told myself whenever I had kids, I wouldn't be that obnoxious parent who'd be like, no, check out more photos of my kids. But I would be lying because here's another photo of her. Of course, I just have to go through I think this whole presentation is going to be me just going through pictures of her. But if you've ever wondered what it's like having a child during a pandemic, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Like I mentioned, this year has been pretty wild. It's been pretty crazy. We've had a pretty awful pandemic. We've had a somewhat tense election. We have had a really challenging economy. And imagine having all of those things and then someone hands you a baby. And that's really what my life has been like over the last several months. But as you look over this past year, I've been talking to a lot of different young people over the last few months. And the common trend I've seen in people is this sense, really this burden or this responsibility of, man, I have to do something. Like I have something to offer. There's a lot happening right now that I don't know how I feel about it, but I know that I want to do something about it. In fact, if you look at this most latest election cycle, we saw almost 10% more voting coming from our young voters than we have seen in the previous election. So people are really starting to think about, man, what's my role? Like, how do I really make a difference where I'm at? And it's a bit of an awkward time for many of us as young people because we're living in a time where everyone else is telling us what we should think about ourselves. Time magazine put out this really famous, in fact, this magazine cover got more feedback, positive and negative, than any other magazine cover that they had published in recent memory. So they put out this magazine cover and they have, a millennial taking a selfie and they call us the me generation. And so they had people writing in saying, amen to that. Millennials are awful. And they had millennials writing in being like, hey, we're not all that bad. But I can never remember a time that there's been one generation that's been so described by other people who are not millennials than now. In fact, if you do a Google search on millennials, Google will automatically fill in some things about millennials, such as we are lazy, we're stupid, or very simply, we're the worst. In fact, you might have even seen news articles come out lately that have talked about the industries that millennials are killing, such as millennials are killing chains like Buffalo Wild Wings and Applebee's. And I'm not here to bash Applebee's, but if you've been to Applebee's lately, you could probably recognize that it's really not like probably your top 5 of restaurants that you go to, but apparently it's millennials' fault, right? And so millennials are not eating enough cereal. They're killing the car industry. We've killed mayonnaise, apparently. How dare we? And I love this news clip that was talking about how millennials are too lazy to even eat cereal. And by the way, if you're younger than millennial, it's not just millennials who are getting a lot of flack. Now Gen Zers are getting plenty of their own fair share of criticism by people in the workplace, by people in the professional world. And as you look at this, as people are telling you, this is who you are, and this is what people think about you, you might have found yourself thinking, well, who am I really? And really, how do I fit in this crazy, wild world that we're living in? In fact, these are the two most common questions that I've gotten from people, especially young people in the business world. It's who am I? How do I fit? And when people ask this question, they're not thinking, how do I fit in? It's not about how do I become, just like everybody else. People are asking really, how do I make an impact right now? Especially in a world where people are telling me what I should think about myself. How do I really bring about an impact and bring about a change? That's what I want to really hone in on today. And so I want to ask you to think about the last networking event that you've been to. Think about the last time you went to a networking event, which during COVID, it might've been a ways ago. It might've been a while ago. But think about the last time that you went and met people at, maybe it was a chamber event, maybe it was just a random business event happening here in NWA. And imagine what it felt like, which, by the way, there's no more awkward, challenging time than when you go to a networking event. In fact, I put out an article last year, said, why are networking events so cringy and awful? Because you get there and it's kind of like, who do I talk to? What do I do? In fact, I've met people who, they're obviously uncomfortable, but I've met people who've come up to me and without saying anything at all, they've just given me their business card and walked off. It's almost like I have to get rid of all my cards before I'm allowed to leave. But we have these networking events where we really don't know exactly what to do or how to act or even what to say about ourselves. In fact, when you were at that networking event, I'd ask you, what was the first thing you used to describe yourself? What did you say about yourself? Did you talk about your accolades? Did you talk about your titles? Did you talk about who you are as a person? And what did that conversation look like? And you probably had some conversations that were really great. You probably had some other conversations that were really awkward and challenging. I remember I was at a networking event and I had a guy come up to me and he said, hey, I am the VP of sales at blank company. And I thought, okay, what's your name? And he was like, oh, right, I totally forgot. My name is, Mark, da, 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 da. And I remember thinking like, what a weird world that we're living in, that we're so accustomed to sort of like this title bearing, and this is who I am, and here's my resume, that we don't even really get back to the basics of this is who I am as a person, right? And it's important to understand that in today's culture, as easy as it is to maybe think this, influence does not come from your title or your position. It's not you being the boss that makes you a change agent. It's actually understanding who you are as a person. So you don't need to be the boss to change things. The simple truth is you have to know who you are and what you stand for. But many of us don't know who we are or what we stand for. I was talking to a guy who was telling me how unhappy he was in his job, which, by the way, you can know if you're happy in your job based on how you feel on Sunday night. Sunday night's probably the most honest point in our week. Why? Because it is the last moment before you start the work week again. And so in that moment of Sunday night, are you feeling excited for the work week, or are you feeling stressed? Are you thinking, how am I even going to make it through this week? Or are you thinking, man, I'm ready to get after it and make this happen? Well, for this one guy that I was talking to, he was telling me, man, I'm really unhappy in my job. Like Sunday night, I just feel so anxious and worn out. And I said, what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, I think I need to quit. And I said, okay. Well, what are you going to do? Like, what's the next job you're going to go to? What are you going to do? And he goes, Blake, I have no idea. I said, okay. Well, what are you passionate about? And he said, I have no idea. I said, okay. What energizes you? What gets you up in the morning? What excites you in your life? And he said, I really honestly haven't a clue. And he's almost 30 years old. And I've noticed this trend in young people where we aren't really clear on what we're passionate about. I was talking to a young guy who he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I said, okay, well, what do you think that word means? And he's like, well, I'm excited about entrepreneurship because it means I can sleep in as late as I want. And I said, okay, it's not quite what entrepreneurship is. It's actually a lot more challenging than that. But we as young people, we aren't always really clear on who we are and what we stand for. For me, what I found in my life is when I haven't been very clear on the values that I've stood for, What I've gone to instead is trying to please other people. I got this photo taken of me, I think it was last year, maybe a couple of years ago. It's a professional photo. And I remember getting this photo thinking, this is gonna make me look really good. It's gonna make me look really credible. I need to show this to people who'd wanna pay for my services. I want them to think that I am the right person for them to hire. The photo that I don't show people is this one. This is a photo of my wife and I. It's a pretty terrible photo, all things considered. It's blurry. We took this photo, we were in Korea. We took this photo. The lighting is terrible. It was a dark, kind of gloomy day. My beautiful, precious wife, her eyes are closed. You know, this isn't a photo that you would lead a presentation with. But what's interesting is this is who we really are. Not this person. This is who we really are. Harvard Business Review put out a study. They were asking this question of how many of us are actually self-aware to who we really are? And how many of us are really trying to present ourselves towards what we think other people want? Now, if you've never checked out Reddit before, which again, some of you may have Reddit open right now. If you've never checked out Reddit, I would say don't check it out. It is a void that will consume your soul. But there's a subreddit, think of it as kind of like a message board. There's one called Blunder Years, and it's where people post pictures of themselves from 10, 15, 20 years ago. And they call them Blunder Years because it's like, wow, I had no idea how awkward and cringy I was that many years ago. Well, so I dug into my Facebook and went to look back at some of the photos that I had, and I found this one. I have no idea what I was thinking doing this photo. It's a very, I just feel kind of uncomfortable looking at the photo. I think I'm embarrassed looking at it. I'm not even sure what I was going for. I'm holding my phone like a true millennial. And then I guess I saw this bamboo forest and thought, I'm gonna stick my head between these two. But this is absolutely a Blunder Years photo. This was from, I think, 2009, 2010, so just over 10 years ago. And I look back at that, and I'm like, man, what was I thinking? What was I doing? You know, when we talk about being self-aware, there's moments in our life where we're really not clear on who we are, but we have a perception of ourselves that isn't really accurate. So going back to this Harvard Business Review study on how many of us actually are self-aware, they found that the number wasn't 50%, wasn't 40%, wasn't even 30% of us are actually self-aware. It's only 10% of us. Only 1 out of every 10 of us are actually in tune with who we think we are and who we actually are. That should trouble you a little bit. And it's not to create anxiety or to make you panic or worried, but it should beg the question of, when you think about who you are and what you stand for, is your perception reality? Because it may not be. When you look in the mirror, is the person you see who you actually are? Or is it someone else entirely? So when we talk about knowing who you are, oh, excuse me, I got really excited on that slide apparently. When we talk about knowing who you really are, ask yourself, what are you really passionate about? Ask yourself, what do you deeply value? And then ask others what they know to be true about who you are. I remember telling people, man, I really care about people. This was in my early 20s. I remember saying, I'm so passionate about other people. And I had someone who was like, I'm surprised to hear that. And I was like, well, why are you surprised to hear that? And he was like, well, nothing personal, but you're kind of an asshole. And I was like, whoa, what? And he was like, you're sarcastic. You're kind of a jerk. And I remember thinking, well, that's not who I want to be. But that is what other people saw in me. And it didn't line up with what I thought was true about me. So thinking about who you are, if you're going to really instill impact, change, influence, it starts with really knowing who you are and who you've uniquely been created to be. Now, there may be a moment in your life that really brought clarity to you in terms of who that person was. Maybe it was a job you had. I've known people who've quit their job. Maybe they had a really awful boss and it helped bring clarity as to who they didn't want to become. I know for me personally, I've always loved this question. How can you ever hope to make a difference if you don't know who you are or what you stand for? I remember thinking, how am I supposed to really instill change if I don't even know the DNA of who I am as a person? And one of the best moments in my life, I say one of the best moments, was actually one of the hardest moments in my life. Even having a kid, people always say like having a kid's the hardest thing you're going to do. And it's somewhat true. It has been really challenging. I don't know when we're ever going to sleep again. But actually, when I think about one of the hardest moments in my life, I think about 10 years ago being a high school teacher. I was a high school teacher down in Houston, Texas. This is actually a picture of my school called Lee High School. It's since been renamed. I think they've totally remodeled the place. It's a very different school today. But I remember working, I was literally working and living in inner city Houston. And I worked as a teacher for about 3 years, and it really shaped my perspective on who I am as a person. And if I can speak really candid to you, if I can be really honest to you, the environment I grew up in had always told me that public school kids are lazy, that they don't want to go to school, that they're not willing to learn, that they're not willing to grow. And what I can tell you is when I went to Houston, it totally challenged my perspective. It totally changed my perspective because I started working with kids who weren't lazy, but I had one student who was always late in the morning because he was up till 2 a.m. working at his job to put food on the table and pay rent because he was the actual breadwinner in his family as a 19-year-old. So it challenged my perspective. It started to form my perception on who I was and what I cared about. But one of the most important memories I have from this time is I remember I was working in this school district and I was facing unprecedented challenges. I remember I was a science teacher, and even being a science teacher, I remember there was a lunch period that I was sitting down with a 10th grader. And I'm sitting down with this 10th grader and we're going over the math flashcards. You might remember this when you were a kid, those math flashcards that are like, 12 plus 9 is 21, and you flip it over and you go on to the next one, and you're just going as quickly as you can. So I'm going through these math flashcards. And again, this guy's a 10th grader, and I'm saying, okay, 13 plus 8. And he's like, 16? No, you're not even close. We're going through this and he's really struggling. And it's not because he's stupid. It's because this particular student, as a 10th grader, this is his first year in school ever. He's just come from El Salvador. Back in his home, he had never been to school. He had actually worked on a farm with his dad his entire life. He was so clever, so easy to talk to, this incredibly bright, amazing person, but he didn't know the answer to the very simple arithmetic problem because he'd never learned it before. And so as a teacher, I found myself facing these challenges like this student and like other students. In fact, I had some students who weren't proficient in English and they weren't even proficient in their own language. So I come in as a teacher, and what I've been taught for education really doesn't apply because it's not what I was taught in terms of this is what schooling is like. It's actually very different. And I remember going to my principal. I had a friend of mine that I was working with, and both of us really felt the same way. We felt like there was a lot on the line. We felt like we needed to get help. And so talking to my friend who was also a teacher, we realized we really needed to figure this thing out because actually for the school in particular, they had been not in good standing. Their test scores had not been high enough. And this was the last year that the school needed to turn it around or it was going to get shut down. It's the last chance we had to bring our scores up. And I remember going to my friend and saying, we need to go to our principal. We need to go to the principal. We need to ask for help. We need to ask her for how do we do this better? Because we're first year teachers and we have no idea what we're doing. So we asked the principal, we said, hey, can we meet with you? We have some questions. She says, absolutely. And my whole life, I've been told that leaders are there to help you be successful. They're there to make you better at your job. They're there to look out for you. And as you hear me say that, you might even think about your boss right now, or you might even think about the kind of boss that you are. And you might think about, is that true for you in particular? It may not be. In my case, it also wasn't true. And so we go into this meeting and it was already really weird because not only did the principal come in, but the head of HR came in with her. It was actually the person who was in charge of HR in this school. And so we sit down And the principal asks, hey, so what's going on? And my friend actually spoke up first. And he said, I don't know what I'm doing. What I was taught in my education program is not matching my experience. The students are really struggling, not because they don't have the gifting or skill set, but because of all these other challenges, such as a student being late to school because they're working. I don't know how to solve these problems. And what was really strange about his story was, as he was talking, I'm sitting right next to him. Across the table, I'm watching the principal. She has a pad of sticky notes, and she's writing on these sticky notes, and she's handing it to her HR person. And the HR person's nodding. They're making sticky note. She's writing on it too and handing it back. And it's this really weird, bizarre thing that's happening. He's totally oblivious to it. So he's talking. He's really talking about all the issues that are happening, and they're passing notes back and forth. I was naive as a first-time teacher, but not so naive that I didn't have a sixth sense as to what was happening. It felt off. It felt like something wasn't right about this. So he finishes sharing, and the principal says, hey, thank you for telling me that. I really appreciate you being honest with me. And then she turns to me and she says, Blake, do you feel the same way? And I remember thinking, what do I say here? Do I be honest? Because I felt the same way. But something in me was screaming at me to say no. And so that's what I said. I said, actually, I think I feel pretty good. I think I can figure this thing out. And she was like, really? And I go, yeah, I think I'm good. I think I feel really good about it. And I think I can figure it out. And she was like, okay. My friend got let go literally that day. Before the final bell went out that day, he was let go. And the principal, the way she described it was, we have a lot on the line. We need people on the team who know what they're doing. And I remember in that moment thinking, this is so wrong. This isn't what leadership, this isn't what I was taught as a kid in terms of what a leader is. I was taught that a leader looks out for you, that they take care of you, that they have your back, they want to see you successful. But in this case, it was totally different. This moment shaped my perspective. It gave me powerful clarity on who I am as a person and what I believe in. Maybe you've been through some challenges in your own life. Maybe, I know this year has been hard for many of us, but maybe you specifically, maybe you especially, that you went through something really hard about this last year. Maybe you lost your job. And I want to challenge you to think about this. Yes, it's a challenge, but it could be an opportunity to give you clarity on what you really care about. For me, the way it developed my message is I started to really hone in on this value of strong leadership. And I started to see leadership as something where you have a duty to make other people more successful. I started to also really hone in on this concept of authenticity and thinking about who I really am as a person. That's my competitive advantage. And lastly, I started to really think about, okay, if I'm going to be a successful professional, I have an obligation to improve, not just for my students, but for the people that I will continue to work with the rest of my life. I have to get better. These are the things that I really developed as a person coming out of this experience as a teacher. Now, as you've developed your own message and as you've developed your own sense of this is who I am and this is what I stand for, I've found that it's actually really hard for many people to actually walk these things out. The reason why this is so challenging is because of one simple thing: social media. This isn't an anti-social media pitch. I'm on social media all the time. I'm posting every day. But what I've noticed is more often than not, we care more about being liked by people than we care about walking out our calling and walking out what we stand for. I spoke to a woman a couple of weeks ago, and she said she's really struggling in her, she runs a sales team. She said, I'm really struggling. I said, why are you struggling? She said, honestly, I want to be liked. That's really what I care about. And I said, I smiled and I said, okay, well, you realize that that's an impossible goal, right? It's impossible to be liked by everyone. She said, yeah. She's not the only one who's told me that before. I've talked to dozens of leaders who said the same thing. We as a culture, we can't help but appreciate being liked. Think about the last time you posted something on social media, maybe even something controversial. You probably refreshed and refreshed and refreshed to see who commented on this, who liked this, who reposted it. Did I say anything that was too controversial and now people are unfriending or unfollowing me? Instagram actually, they did a test to hide likes in a couple of different states. And they found that hiding likes actually makes you happier. The simple truth is that you cannot be influential for anyone if you care more about being liked by everyone. Walking out your calling as a person and the values you stand for implicitly means that there will be people who do not like or appreciate your message. It's just a simple fact. Don't let someone's criticism rob you of your influence, because that criticism is actually guaranteed. It's not about avoiding rejection. Rejection is guaranteed. It's going to happen. I remember when I was starting my podcast. I started the podcast 2 years ago last month. And I did an episode that was called, Should You Pay Your People More? Now, remember, I came out of Houston of working in the school district, and it really formed my leadership perspective. And I started to really have a heart for frontline employees. I started to really, in fact, the work that I do now when I work with people on growing their businesses, and they talk about their employees, they talk about the people that they're hiring, that they're managing, more often than not, I'm challenging people in their perspectives. And what I have found is that this has frankly really pissed off some people. Well, so I put out this episode, it's episode 39, it's Should You Pay Your People More? And I hadn't really gotten much negative feedback on the podcast until this episode. So I asked the question, should you pay your people more? And I think in the first 5 minutes, I said, yeah, you probably should. And around this time, the reason I put out this episode was I was talking to a guy who he was paying his employees $12 an hour, and he was losing his employees. They were quitting because they were going to a competitor who was paying $15 an hour. And he said, what do I do? I said, well, why don't you just pay them more? He said, well, I don't want to. And I said, okay, well then you probably need to get comfortable with people quitting, because that's what's going to happen. Well, so I put out this episode and I had someone reach out. I had gotten very little feedback in general, but no negative feedback about the podcast. So I put out this episode and I get someone who reaches out to me. He says, Blake, I listened to your latest episode. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, what'd you think about it? And he said these words. He said, I didn't realize you were a socialist. Which I remember I heard that. I was like, what? Wait, what? And he was like, yeah, I didn't realize you were a socialist. I'm really disappointed. And it's because I said, you should pay your people more. Now, I'm not cynical about this, but I remember getting this criticism and thinking, do I need to change my message? Am I coming on too strong? Am I wrong? I started thinking all of these things. In fact, I mentioned how I post on social media every day. And I post what I really believe in, the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I care about. And I had this person who commented on one of my posts. I love you, Jason. He said, delete this post. Save the dozens or hundreds who read this nonsense the pain of following bad advice and suffering because of it. And then someone else liked it, which I remember reading this and just feeling so crushed. I was like, wow. Geez, this person, there wasn't like, I guess Facebook needs like a disagree button, but he wasn't just disagreeing. I was like, I see what you did. My business is called Good Advice. You said bad advice. I get it. But this person really rocked me to my core, because I was like, man, am I communicating the wrong message? But see, your ability to enforce real change is directly related to your comfort level with criticism. Because again, it's guaranteed. And something that, when people are critical of you, when they challenge you, the answer isn't actually to change the message. It's to tell them to change the channel. There's an old truth in sales. It's one of the most profound sales truths that you can abide by. If you're in sales, you need to understand this. Just because someone doesn't buy from you doesn't mean you're selling the wrong thing. Sometimes when people don't buy from you, it's because they were never a good fit in the first place. I remember I had a woman who I was talking to. She had seen her entire staff, 12 people, turn over the last 18 months. They had all quit, all of them. And so we were talking, and I was trying to sell her some services and how to fix her business and grow it. And she was lamenting about the situation. And she said, it's just impossible to find good work these days. Millennials are really unhireable, to be honest. And I heard her say this, and I turned back to her and I said, that may be true, but what I've found to be true is that when your entire staff quits in 18 months, usually it's not them, usually it's you. Usually it's the leader. And that's what I told her. And she turned back to me and she scoffed and said, well, if you're telling me it's my fault, I'm not going to hire you. And I remember thinking, well, I wouldn't want to work with you anyway. See, it's not about changing the message. It's about understanding that not everyone is designed to work with you. And I've always loved this quote: for every one person who criticizes you, there's 10 more who think you are a total badass. Now, they may not be saying it, but they think that about you. In fact, I took Jason's lovely comment and I started looking at some of the Google reviews and some of the testimonials that people had said about me. Stephanie Medford, she's the CEO of our local Ronald McDonald House Charities, one of the best organizations I've ever worked with. And she said some great things about me. My friend Eve had said some things about me. My friend Jason had said basically I'd flipped his business around. These are things that I've had to cling to remind myself that it's not about my message. It's about understanding that everything special about me is what connects me with the people that I can have the most impact with. That's what it means to be comfortable with who you are as a person. It's knowing that I can't actually be all things to all people. There's actually a tribe of people that I'm best in tune with to impact, grow, change, and develop. I love this quote, and I encourage you to think about those 10 people as well. And more importantly, to own your badassery. This doesn't mean to be totally arrogant. It doesn't mean to, show up at your workplace and, now you're taking the best parking spot. I'm amazing. It's not about you, but it is about being confident in who you are as a person and what you have to offer. So why is this so hard to do? First of all, we pretend that insecurity is actually humility. And second of all, we over magnify our flaws. There was a woman I was working with where she talked about in her business, she was offered a $10,000 bonus. And the challenge was, if you can help grow our revenue from $400,000 to $800,000 by the end of our fiscal year, we're going to give you a $10,000 bonus. Well, she didn't just grow it from 400K to 800K. Her and her team grew it to $2 million in revenue, a massive increase. Well, so she goes to the boss and I'm talking to her about this. I'm saying, so did you get the bonus? She says, well, I went to the boss and I asked him about it. And he said, we really are in a time of hyper growth. We can't award that bonus right now, but maybe next year. And I said, well, what did you say? She said, I said, okay. Maybe I don't really deserve it. And I was so shocked that her thinking had flipped to obviously getting the results, but to, I don't deserve this. And in some ways I can actually, I understand where she's coming from, because we as people, we know all of our flaws, we know our shortcomings. And often we think that we're being humble when really we're acting like we're undeserving of things. And the simple truth is, if you're always waiting for someone else to give you the value you deserve, you're going to be waiting literally your entire rest of your life. For myself personally, I remember I had a company out of Atlanta who called me. They said, Blake, we want to fly you down to do some work with us. And I remember telling them, okay, you don't want to pay for me. There's plenty of options in Atlanta. Here's a couple of suggestions. Is you're going to save a lot of money by not having to fly someone, not having to pay for a hotel if you get someone local. And she said, okay, yeah, sure, we'll go with someone local. And they did. And I remember telling that story to a mentor of mine. And he said, Blake, I'm really surprised you talked them out of it. And I think it's not because you were trying to be humble. I think it's because you ultimately didn't think you were worthy of their dollar. And I thought about that and I thought, that's true. It's true. I was insecure and thought I wasn't worthy of it because I knew my flaws. It's important to understand that your flaws don't discredit you. In fact, surprisingly, everyone has these flaws. I was talking to a guy he's the top salesperson in his business. and he was thinking about applying for a leadership position. And I said, well, what's stopping you? And he said, well, I have some shortcomings. I have some flaws. And I said, yeah, so does everyone, right? But for us, it's always a big deal. My beautiful wife, for example, check out this hottie, which by the way, I showed this slide one time before and I said, check out this hottie. And someone was like, hey, that's really inappropriate. You shouldn't say that about a person. And I said, okay, that's actually my wife again, by the way. So this is my wife, not some random person. So my wife runs a business called Culture Connection. When she was first thinking about starting her business, she thought, I'm not qualified. I'm not, which by the way, what she does is she helps people connect with other cultures by solving the language barriers. So she teaches English, she teaches Spanish, she teaches ASL, American Sign Language, and she tries to get people to engage with cultures different than their own. It's a really beautiful, amazing business that she runs. But I remember her thinking, I'm not good enough. Sometimes I say things the wrong way or I make mistakes. Who would ever pay me to do this? Well, this was maybe a year and a half ago. She had not a single review that was not 5 stars. Every review was 5 stars. She had over 100 of them. And from the first day she started her business, she's earned tens of thousands of dollars in running this business. Things that could have maybe not happened if she didn't believe in what she had to offer, if she over magnified her own flaws. And she's had great feedback on it. People who literally have had their lives transformed by what she does for a living. See, some things just really aren't a big deal. So I'd encourage you not to keep yourself from the impact that you want to make because of whatever flaws you think you may have. The other things that we do that keep us from having the impact we want, we don't build the trust we need, and we aren't nearly patient enough. I don't know if you ever watched Seinfeld. It's actually one of my favorite shows, but there's this really great episode where Jerry and Elaine are being asked to come to their friend's house to meet the new baby. And I totally understand this because, again, when you have your baby, you're like, I didn't care at all about babies before, but now that I have my own, I want everyone to know about my baby. Well, so they're asked to come see this baby, and it is, I don't know how to describe it. It's an ugly baby. I mean, it is just an ugly baby. I mean, Elaine is looking at this baby thinking, oh my gosh. The dad is like, isn't he cute? And she's like, yikes. Kramer is like, oh, that is one ugly baby. And wherever you work, whatever you're doing for a living, you may go in day after day at work and you may be thinking, this place is an ugly baby. Seriously, there's so much dysfunctional about this place. There's so much that isn't pinging, that isn't working here. And you have an ugly baby. Your day-to-day life is basically engaging with this ugly baby. What I have found, though, is that people don't understand the need to build trust to be able to change things. And here's what I mean by this. There's an old story of a group of interns who were hired at this prestigious firm. And it was a firm where you get hired as an intern and then you get brought in as a full-time employee once the summer's done. And it's incredibly competitive. Everyone wants to get this internship because it's a national firm that's highly respected. Well, one of the requirements working here is professional attire. So you have to dress really well when you work here. Well, during the first week working here, the interns got together and they said, you know what, this is kind of silly. We don't even meet clients on a day-to-day basis. We don't even see customers. So we shouldn't have to wear professional attire like other people should. And so what they did was they went to the CEO, they filled out this petition and they handed it to the CEO, and the CEO fired them and said, you guys are insane. You're ridiculous. It's not because their criticism was unfounded. They could have been right. It's because they hadn't earned their right to be heard and earned the trust they needed for people to listen to them. Wherever you're working now, there may be some things that you want to see changed. There may be changes that you want to make. Make sure you're seen as credible and reliable before you hope to make those changes. I was talking to a gentleman. He's the VP of a sales team for a company out of Houston just this last weekend. And he said, Blake, it's so frustrating because they don't do what I tell them to. They don't do what I say. They do something totally opposite. And I said, it's because they don't trust you. He goes, no, they trust me. I'm the boss. And I said, being the boss doesn't make you trustworthy. Relationships makes you trustworthy. Spending time there makes you trustworthy. And so if you have an ugly baby that you're working at, There's an old truth that I think is really applicable. It's make sure you're part of the family before you call the baby ugly. And again, the way to do that is through relationships. The last thing I'll tell you is you have to be patient because impact takes time. And the reason that we don't understand this is because, frankly, social media is filled with people who are, and again, I don't know this person. I don't know how accurate the story is. What I do know is that more often than not, people leave out a lot of the details of their journey, and they only tell you about the successful parts. Like I could easily stand up here and tell you about the podcast and like how I have people paying for advertising slots and how amazing it is. And I could leave out the fact that for the first month or two, the only people listening to the podcast was myself and my wife. I could leave that out and present myself as, oh, I just put it together. I just got on a microphone. Everyone started listening. It was amazing. This podcast is 2 years in the making of hard work, effort, energy, recording it, editing it, knowing nothing about any of this stuff and putting it up. But social media presents this perspective that is not real. It presents an image of success that people think looks one way when actually it's very much different. I love the story of Rob Angel. He's the creator of Pictionary. It's one of the most acclaimed board games, if you can call it a board game, in history. Well, the details you may not know about his story is that he actually month after month, year after year would go to the mall, the local mall, and he would tell people about it. And he'd try to get them to buy from him. And they'd say, why would I buy that from you? What a stupid idea. That's never going to go anywhere. But day in and day out, he continued at it until finally he started to see the fruit of his labor. There's no such thing as an overnight success story. It's just people who are being diligent and walking out their calling day after day after day. And I'll never forget, I was working as a camp counselor at a summer camp. And I had this kid, I said, Wayne, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, man, I want to be a great dad. And I thought, okay, that's great, but dude, you're 14. That's going to be a ways away. Hopefully it's going to be a while away. Or I was talking to a person who was like, I want to own a Chick-fil-A one day. And I said, you just got out of high school. No one's gonna ask you to run Chick-fil-A right now. But if you're good at what you're doing right now, if you grow yourself right now, then maybe one day that'll happen. Or I had a person who was like, I want to transform this company. And I was like, yeah, you've been here 6 weeks. It hasn't even been 2 months yet. It takes time for these things to happen. And waiting has to be okay because this is when we grow. It's when we develop. It's when challenges give us clarity. You know, life is not an Instant Pot. It's a slow cooker. My wife and I, we got this Instant Pot over this last holiday season. And let me tell you something. If you need to have any faith in humanity, if you need some hope in 2020, you need to go out and buy yourself an Instant Pot because it's a game changer. I mean, literally in 6 minutes, we can have this amazing, we just start dumping stuff into the pot and what comes out is this awesome meal. But life is not an Instant Pot. It's a slow cooker. It takes time. It takes time to find success. It takes time to create change in your lane. So as you think about who you are as a person, as you think about the values you stand for, I want to encourage you to be comfortable in the waiting, but to be assertive in what you're trying to see accomplished. Lastly, what I'll say, as you think about all these things, I want to ask you to think about what's your personal mission statement? Literally, why do you exist? What makes you valuable? And even maybe right now on another tab, you might even open up Google Docs. You might even just off the top of your head, whatever comes first to your mind, you might even write out a single sentence on this is what I stand for. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be something catchy. This is what I stand for. And then if I were you, what I would do is I would surround yourself with people who are going to help you believe it. Because here's why. You're going to be shaped by the loudest voice in your life. So who are you listening to? For me personally, my personal mission statement, I had a mentor who transformed my life when I was growing up. And he said, Blake, my life mission is to hold the ladder for other people to climb up. Think about how awesome that is in a time where we're so consumed with getting to that next rung, that next promotion, the next pay raise, what have you, to instead think about someone else and think about how do I make them successful, maybe even more successful than me, This is what my personal mission statement is, and I want to challenge you to do the same. Hey, if you want to stay engaged with us, I just put out an episode 142, Why Empathy Matters Most. You can also check out the podcast literally anywhere you listen to podcasts, but we're on Patreon, patreon.com/good advice if you want to be a sponsor of the podcast. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, just literally /Blake Benz. And also, you got to get on the newsletter. It goes out every week. It's this week's Good Advice newsletter. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope the rest of this conference is amazing and incredible for you. Take good notes. Don't just have it be something that's open on your screen. Tune in, lock in, because these next couple of days could totally transform your influence and make you an empowered change agent. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you later.
Thank you, Blake. I am a follower of your podcast. I follow you on Instagram. I follow you on LinkedIn, all the social media platforms. I love the content that you put out. So thank you for coming and being a part of this today. Right now, we're going to head into our first breakout session. Remember, these breakout sessions are pre-recorded. You can watch them now. You can watch them later. But join us back here live at 11:45 as we have Dr. Bowtie Todd Jenkins here in the studio with us, having a conversation about how we have hard conversations in the workplace. So join us back here live at 11:45. We'll see you then.